Conflict is at the heart of every great story. However, when this week I realized that hero versus hero violence that was so prevalent last year is still rearing its ugly head this year, I wanted to talk about it again.
And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob, the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is...
The heart of hero versus hero. Alright, some of you know that I read comic books and have since I was a teenager. Actually, just before I was a teenager. But the thing is that they always had this sort of element in them. And now, as they get into movies and TV shows and cartoons, they're bringing that element with them. But the problem is that the comic books have taken it to its illogical next conclusion. So I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today I think I'm going to talk about something a little different. I'm going to talk about a pet peeve of mine. And that is when we have things that don't make sense just for the sake of the story. Why it is we put protagonists against each other. What is a pet peeve? Well, a pet peeve is just that little thing that annoys you. You know, that thing that isn't really wrong necessarily, but just grates on you. And as someone who thinks that stories are a great window into how and why we live, it's really hard for me to put aside when there's a trope that bugs me this much. Now, for those of you that don't know, what I do here is I review stories as they come up, mostly TV shows and movies, occasionally books and comic books, and then come up with Throwback Thursdays every Thursday, and ask you to share these and help me grow my community. If that sounds interesting, why don't you click that subscribe button? Because I just hit 100 subscribers. I'm at 111 as of the recording of this. And at the end of tonight's video, I'm giving away an Amazon gift card to someone that commented on that video. I have four contestants. Well, thank you, the four of you, for starting. And let's get started talking about this. Before we do, I guess I'm going to throw a spoiler alert up for Marvel Civil War comic and movie. This entire season of Arrow. Just, all the comic book shows this season. But I want to start with a distinction. There's a difference between a face-heel turn. And that's a wrestling term originally, although one that's carried over into all sorts of dramas. The face is the hero, the guy that's charismatic you're supposed to like. The heel is the anti-that. They're the bad guy, the person you're supposed to rail against. Sometimes you have to turn a face into a heel in order to have someone turn about and become evil. Now, the opposite happens too. Sometimes you need to turn a heel into a face and get someone to like him. Of course, sometimes that's a little dubious and a little questionable about whether or not they're really in it for the heroics or if they're just some sort of machinating master plan. And when we talked about heroes versus the law, we talked about the difference between being a hero and being a vigilante. And that's a very big difference that gets brought up a lot, especially in Arrow. But the idea is that there's a certain amount of heroics that comes from being a superhero. So when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about two people who are very clearly supposed to be the faces, are supposed to be the heroes of the story, are supposed to be helping people, are fighting against each other, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad reasons. And that's what I mean when I mean hero versus hero. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is Black Siren. Black Siren is this trope done right. She's a bad guy. She's a supervillain. She's a murderer. And she's a badass. She's also the doppelganger, or complete copy of, a hero that we had in our world, Black Canary. However, our Black Canary died. It's the same actress playing the role, and now she's a villain. And there's this whole big question throughout Arrow this year of what do you do when you see someone's face who's actually a friend, but they're an enemy. And Black Siren is as badass as Black Canary is in the comics. I'd like to point out that in the comics, there's an entire Injustice storyline where Superman became the bad guy. I mean, doing it as an alternate world is one thing, because at that point, you have people that are actually supposed to be heroes acting like villains, but that's because their characters are villains. It's a different character. So again, this doesn't quite transfer over into being a hero versus hero moment. A great way of looking at this is popular culture right now. If Captain America and Iron Man are going to fight each other. They're going to fight each other. But if they're both supposed to be portrayed as heroes, that's hero versus hero. If one of them's an alternate dimensional copy or a mind control situation, that's not necessarily hero versus hero. Now, there's also a trope that goes along with this: the evil doppelganger when you have to fight them yourself. Evil Superman fights good Superman. Evil Green Arrow fights good Green Arrow. This year's crossover over on the on the CW. Wow, am I showing my age calling it the WB? Had something like the Crime Syndicate of America, although not exactly. Basically, they had an Earth where the heroes we know were villains. So we had a bunch of people playing double roles. And they actually did it pretty well. And one of the best things they did is they made sure all of them were wearing masks. Why? Because you can't tell whether this is Supergirl or Supergirl's stunt double now, can you? Like I said, done right, using the alternate dimension, allows you to have evil Supergirl without messing up Supergirl's character. No one's going to look at this and say, how can Supergirl ever work with Flash again? Because Supergirl and Flash are friends. These are different Supergirl and Flashes. Now, the way they normally do it in the comics is a lot like this scene. The first time two heroes see each other, they have to duke it out. They have different agendas. They have different things. And then they become friends, or, well, in this case, boyfriend, girlfriend, and lovers. And being a child of the 80s, I have to say, I'm used to this. Oh, Superman and Batman meet for the first time in this continuity. Oh, they gotta show how tough they are. It's not always done well, but at least it's one of those things I've gotten used to. Now, the problem is when you get into stories where characters are already developed, we already have this character, and there's no reason for it. Now, I'm not big on the whole DC versus Marvel thing, because I think both of them are great and both of them tell great stories. But I have to say, I would much rather see a deep, introspective story where there is a very clear good guy and bad guy, and they're being manipulated, like Superman v Batman, instead of Civil War. And I know that puts me in the minority by a major landslide. But way back when, Civil War the comic, I thought was going to be such a game changer. I mean, nothing would ever be the same again. How could Captain America and Tony Stark ever work together again? I mean, Tony Stark was obviously the villain, right? Well, I was wrong. In fact, I've been told that many times, that Quesada said Tony Stark was in the right and that Steve Rogers was in the wrong, and I still don't get that. And I could pick apart that story and complain about it for an hour, but I'm not going to. Instead, what I'm going to say is the base idea of putting a hero versus hero in that moment wrecks the idea of both heroes. Yes, when we have complex characters, we're going to have complex situations. We're going to have moments where people don't get along and they come to arguments. Maybe even they come to blows. But those aren't really going into full hero versus hero moments. Those are little outbursts, and that's one thing. And of course, in a world where we have crazy spells that switch alignment and mind control and God knows what else, there's going to be times where we're going to have someone going against someone, and we're going to have Elseworld stories where we're going to ask who can beat who. But at the end of the day, if it's in main continuity, you have this problem. How can anyone see someone as a hero when they break one of the very first tenets we teach our kids? We use our words here, not our hands. After all, if the point of telling stories is to get points across, the point should never be when your friend and you disagree, you should hit them. Now, having said that, I am a horrible example because I'm going to tell this story. It was about a year and a half ago. We were buying a bed for my mother, and my niece and nephew were with us. And my niece and nephew were arguing, and my niece at the time was 8 years old. And she hit her brother, and I said, Lily, what are you doing? You know better than that. What do I always tell you? And without missing a beat, the sweet little innocent girl said, if I'm gonna hit someone, knock them down. And I went, no, not that. And now everyone at Bob's Discount Furniture is like staring at me like, why would you say such a thing to such a sweet, innocent girl? And I'm like, the other thing, and she's like, don't use your hands, use your words. And I'm like, yes, that's the important, because yes, I want her to be able to defend herself. I want her to be able to, if it comes to violence, be able to handle it. But I never want her to start a fight. I don't want her to be the bully. And that's what really kind of bugged me this week. because of Arrow, when someone called Arrow a bully, and I think they were right. And I think about the fact that I wouldn't want anyone to think of these people as heroes at this point. In the middle of this week's episode of Arrow, when we're firmly in villain or hero versus hero, no villain in sight, Red Dog says to the title character of Green Arrow, "You know what? You want to hit me, don't you? Because that's how you solve problems. You hit things. You know what? That doesn't make you a hero. That makes you a bully." And then he pushes him, and he ends up by the end of the night getting put in the hospital by Arrow. I want you to think about that for a second. The superhero put someone in the hospital who's also a superhero. But they've had a hypocrisy problem on Green Arrow for a while now. We've had people who were bad guys because they were killing bad guys, they were killing criminals, but Ollie has killed criminals. In fact, when Ollie started, he was a vigilante who would sit there and say, "You failed the city," and shoot them with an arrow and like put it through their heart and kill them. So sometimes he still kills people when he has to, and yeah, he tries to be better, but not always. So now we have the situation where he has people that shoot people with guns on his team, but he doesn't like other people using guns, and he doesn't like when people kill, but he kills. And this definitely is not a Green Arrow specific thing. There's a bunch of shows that do this sort of thing. In fact, as the Defenders got together, all of them were sitting there and looking at each other like, "No, you're crazy. I'm just trying to help people. Yeah, you're all doing the same exact thing." But these are all examples of, at least in my opinion, differing degrees of doing this the wrong way. There's a way to do it right. Of all shows, Voltron is doing excellent, but I don't want to do spoilers for that. Instead, I'm going to talk about another superhero show. I want to talk about Black Lightning on the CW. The same channel, the same staff that works on Arrow, has a character, Thunder, who's Black Lightning's daughter, who has found out that she has superpowers that, for the sake of ease, we're going to call invulnerability and super strength. It's actually density control, but for all intents and purposes, it's super strength and invulnerability. And she's trying to help people. And she idolizes Black Lightning, but she doesn't know it's her father. And there's this great scene this week where she goes somewhere where she's going to explain her secret identity and what she's been doing to her mother, but her mother's in trouble. And she ends up fighting these guys, and it is hysterical when they shoot her with a gun and she just stands there, and then the other one points a gun at her, and she's like, "Oh, what, did you think he missed?" And she goes to untie her mom, but that's when Black Lightning comes in. By the way, Black Lightning's been having power problems, and his powers have been making him more irritable. So he's kind of a little under the weather when the two of them end up having this knockdown, drag-out fight. But the series has already touched on why there needs to be superpowered people active. And we've already seen Jefferson be happy when one of his daughters were like, "Oh, you fought two people at the same time? That's pretty cool." But then he's aghast when he realizes what he's done because, well, he beats up his daughter before he realizes it's her. Now, Black Lightning isn't just a superhero show. It also happens to be a family drama about this family right here. So we knew that this was going to come into conflict sooner or later. We knew it right from the first previews. By the way, his other daughter hasn't started to show her powers yet, but in the comics she has them. So I'm curious to see how this shapes up and how it ends up with him taking her under his wing. The difference is, though, unlike Batman v Superman, unlike Civil War, unlike everything going on this week on Arrow, there was a good reason for them to accidentally come into conflict, and it was short and it was over. And I really wish that the comic books did this too. One of my friends counted, and out of the last 15 crossover events Marvel had, 13 of them had hero versus hero violence as one of their main themes. And this is how it's becoming a pet peeve of mine. I don't want my heroes to feel cookie cutter and two-dimensional, but at the same time, can we make them three-dimensional and have them have disagreements without them being so stubborn that they absolutely have to come to blows over everything? Can't they just argue and discuss things like adults? Can't they give and take and compromise? Wouldn't that be pretty good in this day and age? Maybe I'm getting preachy. Alright, so it's time for the big contest. And like I said, we have count them, four possible winners of this $20 Amazon money. So at first I was going to get a random number generator, but I guess I just need a four-sided die. And as I rolled it, it came up lucky number 3. So that is John Max. Okay, John, all I need you to do is send me a private message on the back end of my account. It's under the About screen under Heart of the Stories You Tell, and that'll allow me to respond, and I will respond with the numbers on the back of the Amazon gift card, giving you $20. And a big thank you to everyone that participated, because hitting 100 subscribers was always a big deal to me. But I had some fun doing this, so I want to do it again. Let me know down below if you think I should run a contest like this again in a month or so. Also, let me know what you think. Do you think I'm being an old curmudgeon by not liking hero vs. hero things? Do you think that I'm kind of have a blind spot that I liked the Black Lightning version where I didn't like some of the others? Let me know. And of course, share this video, like and help me get those mentions up there. Subscribe if you haven't already, because joining this community means a lot more to me than just being part of a contest or just being a number. It means that we can all talk about what it means to be in a story. And since a friend of mine just let me borrow his college textbook that someone had asked me if I was going to go to college, and it has a whole bunch of stuff about getting to the heart of the story, this is going to make my theory videos a little more academic for the next couple of weeks. I hope you have a good night, and thanks for walking with me through the heart of the stories we tell. Have a good night.